You're not essential to this project anymore. Just let the leadership handle it from here. That's what Eric told me, flat, clipped like he was cutting dead weight from the bottom of his shoe. No emotion, no thanks. Just that. I stood there in that glass meeting room staring at him, heart racing but face blank. It was supposed to be a quick sync up before our client call. Instead, I was being removed from the account I'd helped win, build, and deliver without a word of warning. I didn't argue, I didn't raise my voice, I just nodded once, slowly, and walked out. People always think betrayal comes with fireworks, shouting, slamming doors, dramatic exits. But sometimes it comes like that, in a quiet room, mid-morning, with your name erased from a calendar invite and a man who won't meet your eyes. It's funny, Eric used to call me his secret weapon. He liked saying it in front of others, like it gave him some kind of edge. But the second my work got noticed by someone who mattered more than he did, suddenly I was a threat, not an asset. And the lesson I learned that day, one I'd carry in silence for weeks after, was this. They will use you, drain you, and discard you the moment your light starts to shine brighter than theirs. But what Eric didn't know was that I'd been paying attention, and I wasn't done. 6 months earlier, I was walking into that same building with a whole different kind of energy. We had just won the Marcella account. That's what we called it internally, even though her company had a long, cold name full of syllables and numbers. But Marcella, their VP of Strategic Growth, she was the reason the deal happened, and I was the one who convinced her. It was one of those perfect pitch moments. I still remember the way she paused during the closing slide, her eyes meeting mine, like she was confirming a suspicion she already had. We got the contract, big money, high visibility. I didn't sleep for 2 days after the announcement, too wired with adrenaline, ideas, urgency. Eric said, "Don't get used to the spotlight. Clients like her can flip on you fast." I thought it was just caution. Now I know better. That project became my life. I crafted every milestone, answered every fire drill, built relationships with her team brick by brick. I wasn't the account manager by title, but in every practical sense, I was. And when Marcella sent a personal thank you email after the Q2 results with my name in the subject line and Eric CC'd, my inbox stayed quiet for 2 days. No reply, no well done, just silence. The next Monday, I was no longer invited to the strategy call. My permissions were pulled from the shared drive, tasks were reassigned, questions that used to come to me stopped coming at all. They didn't even need to say it. I was being erased. But not quietly, because even then, even as I sat there watching my work be handed to junior staff and my seat at the table be filled by someone else, I was taking notes, watching, listening, remembering. I didn't raise my voice, but I didn't forget. My name is Dana Malik. I'm 33 years old, and this isn't the story of how I got pushed out. It's the story of what happened after. It started small, just enough to make me second-guess myself. An invitation that didn't arrive, a meeting that used to have my name on it, now forwarded with a vague FYI after it ended. Eric stopped asking for my input on deliverables and started looping in a junior associate just to have a second set of hands. I told myself it was normal. Teams expand, roles shift. Maybe he was trying to free me up for something bigger. But the shift wasn't upward, it was out. I'd log into the project dashboard and see tasks reassigned, notes removed, comments edited. Things I had built from scratch, the structure, the flow, even the client-facing materials were being rebranded with someone else's name on them. It wasn't just demotion, it was deletion. When I asked Eric about it, he smiled without his eyes and said, "I need you to start thinking bigger picture, less execution, more observation." Observation? That's what he wanted me to do. Watch as everything I'd created was peeled away, piece by piece. Marcella didn't know, or at least she didn't seem to. We still had our occasional check-ins, but Eric made sure they stayed brief, surface level. I was given prep notes, bulleted talking points he wanted me to stick to. No more real conversations, just script. At one point, I tried to bring up a strategy shift I knew she'd want to hear about. Eric cut in before I could finish the sentence. "Let's not get into that now," he said. "It's not relevant." She looked surprised. So was I. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't just being moved aside, I was being silenced. The worst part wasn't the professional slight, it was the personal humiliation. The way coworkers who used to greet me with casual respect now avoided eye contact. The way whispers started when I passed by a cluster of desks. I wasn't being shunned outright. That would have been easier. I was being erased slowly, systematically, like a watermark being faded out with every pass of a cloth. And the more I complied, the quieter I became, the more invisible I felt. But here's the thing about observation. It teaches you more than doing ever can. I stopped trying to prove myself. I started paying attention. Who Eric trusted, what patterns he followed, which parts of the story he rewrote when talking to the client. I saw it all. And quietly, I started saving it. Because if there was one thing I knew with absolute certainty, it was this. Eric thought he'd won. And that belief, that arrogance, it was going to cost him more than he ever imagined. It was a Tuesday morning when the final cut came. Rainy, quiet, the kind of morning where everything feels muted, like the world's trying to soften a blow before it lands. I had been prepping for our Q3 client review since 6:45 a.m., cleaning up decks, reviewing implementation milestones, stitching together feedback loops from the client's team. Marcella's calendar had the call marked Executive Review, Strategic Realignment. That language? Mine. I wrote it. By 9:30, I was waiting in the conference room, slides loaded, notes in hand. Eric walked in 10 minutes late, sipping his coffee like we were headed into just another check-in. No urgency, no acknowledgement. He didn't sit. Instead, he stood across from me, still holding his coffee, and said, "I've reassigned the client-facing portion of this call to Josh. You can drop from the meeting." I blinked. "Sorry, what?" "I need Josh to lead today," he said, casually scrolling on his phone. "Marcella asked for fresh thinking, and I think your approach has gotten a bit too attached. She needs objectivity now." He didn't look up. He didn't have to. That sentence, "too attached," it told me everything. He had been laying the groundwork behind closed doors, rewriting the story of my role, framing my commitment as bias, my relationship with the client as overstepping, and I knew right then it was over. The meeting started without me. I sat in a nearby pod, staring at the wall, not hearing anything but the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. At one point, someone walked past and paused, like they were about to ask me something, then turned and kept going. I didn't move. That afternoon, I requested access logs from our shared folders. Just a quiet email to IT, citing a project audit trail. No one questioned it. They never do when you sound calm and methodical. I started pulling records, timestamps of document edits, ownership histories, old decks with my author tags mysteriously removed. I found client emails where I was the direct recipient, now buried under threads that excluded me. And at the center of it all, Eric, tightening the circle around himself while gradually pushing me out of the narrative. It wasn't just petty, it was surgical. But something Eric never accounted for was that Marcella and I had built a foundation on results, not roles, and the one thing she always noticed, always asked about, was follow-through. She didn't care about buzzwords or titles, she cared about outcomes, and I had delivered every single time. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift in me. Not rage, not despair, clarity. This wasn't a fight I could win by confrontation. That would only validate the version of me Eric had been quietly spinning. Emotional, difficult, insubordinate. Number. This required patience, timing, precision. Let him think he'd removed me. Let him think I was sitting in a corner, licking my wounds. What he didn't realize was that while he was rewriting the story, I was keeping the receipts, and soon I'd make sure the right person read them. For weeks, I moved like a ghost through that office. I still showed up early, still answered emails before most people's alarms had even gone off. I attended meetings when I was invited and kept my tone professional, my face unreadable. But inside, something had broken. Not loud, not dramatic, just quietly severed. The kind of break you don't notice until it aches in silence. No one confronted me directly. They didn't have to. The shift had already happened. I wasn't part of the core team anymore. I wasn't looped into brainstorms. The client update tracker I'd maintained religiously for 6 months, archived. A new one appeared with a different owner. No announcement, just a silent overwrite. At lunch, I sat alone more often. Not by choice, but by an invisible distance people instinctively observed. No one wanted to be seen too close to someone who'd fallen out of favor. I don't blame them. It's how this system trains us. I didn't cry. I didn't vent. I didn't tell friends outside of work because I knew how the story would sound. Ambiguous, small, like office politics. But it wasn't. It was deeper. It was the theft of something I couldn't articulate, the pride of having built something, and the heartbreak of watching it be taken from me by the very person who'd once praised it. Eric walked the halls like nothing had changed. Same smug chuckle, same buddy-buddy charm when execs passed by. He'd flash me that neutral smile, flat, distant, as if to say, "You still here?" And every time, I wanted to look him straight in the eye and ask, "What are you afraid of?" Because that's what this was, wasn't it? Fear. He saw how Marcella responded to my insight, how her team defaulted to me for direction, how the deliverables I touched actually worked. I wasn't a threat because I failed. I was a threat because I succeeded without permission. And in his world, that was unforgivable. But while he was busy polishing optics, I was building a different kind of foundation. I went back through every draft I'd written, every workflow I had designed. I downloaded copies of anything that bore my fingerprints. Not to weaponize them, but to remind myself I hadn't imagined it, that it was real, that I had built something worth stealing. I started keeping a journal, not just of events, but of words. The way people spoke to me shifted subtly over time. "Oh, I thought you weren't on this project anymore." "Eric said you were focusing on training now." "Wait, I didn't realize you worked on that deck." I documented everyone, and yet I didn't feel angry, not in the way people usually describe it. My version of anger was quieter. It was watching someone lie through their teeth and deciding not to correct them because I knew the truth, and eventually someone else would too. Marcella still sent me the occasional note. "Quick question, can you remind me what we agreed on in that strategy doc from May?" I'd reply quickly, professionally, attaching the document, no hint of what was going on beneath the surface. She never asked why Eric was answering most of her questions now, or why my name wasn't on updated files. Maybe she suspected, maybe she didn't. But every now and then, she'd end the email with, "Appreciate your clarity as always." Those small acknowledgments, they were oxygen, because they told me someone still saw me, even if the system around me didn't want to. I wasn't plotting revenge, not yet. I was still grieving the loss of trust, still untangling the confusion of how someone I'd once respected could so carefully dismantle my role without flinching. But I knew one thing for certain. Silence wasn't surrender. It was just the pause before the pivot. And mine was coming. There's a moment right after disappointment hardens into resolve when the world feels sharper, colors more vivid, sounds more distinct. You stop hoping for fairness and start watching for opportunity. That's where I was. I didn't announce anything. I didn't need to. Instead, I started tracking patterns. Who Eric CC'd on key decisions, how meeting minutes were worded when he was trying to take credit for team wins. I saved every version, even the sloppy ones, especially the ones where my name was scrubbed. At night, I backed up my contributions, every file I created, every version history that showed my edits, every timestamp that proved I wasn't just involved, I had led. The strategy framework that impressed Marcella's board? Mine? The client survey analysis that sparked their third quarter budget increase? Built in my living room over takeout. I kept it all. Not because I planned to sue, because I needed to own what was mine, even if the company refused to. Still, I knew evidence wasn't enough. The real risk wasn't legal, it was narrative. Eric had rewritten the story inside the company, but outside, in Marcella's world, that version hadn't taken full hold yet. She was still asking the occasional question, still referring to frameworks I'd built, even if she didn't know it was me behind them. So I made a quiet move. I reached out to Lena, one of Marcella's senior analysts. We'd worked closely during the early sprints, and I'd helped her team navigate a few chaotic deadline weeks. I sent a simple LinkedIn message. Saw your recent update. Congrats on the campaign rollout. Would love to catch up sometime. No agenda. Nothing pointed, nothing risky. She responded the same day. We met for coffee the following week, off the record, away from both companies. It started casual, life updates, project stress. Then, as we talked about the client's direction, she said something that caught my ear. You know, Marcella asked the other day why the updates have gotten so vague. She misses the detail you used to bring. She didn't say it like it was meant to sting, just an observation, but to me, it was confirmation. Marcella had noticed, she just hadn't connected the dots. Yet, I didn't unload, I didn't rant. I just nodded and said, yeah, I've been pulled on to other things lately. I'm still in the loop, technically. Technically? That word sat between us like a lit match. Later that night, I drafted an internal summary, something I used to send regularly, a digest of insights, metrics, feedback points from the early phase of the project. I personalized it to Marcella like I always had. This time, I didn't run it by Eric. I sent it directly. The response came 20 minutes later. This is exactly what I've been missing. Thank you, Dana. Let's reconnect soon. Short, polite, but the undercurrent was clear. Marcella hadn't turned on me. She'd just been operating with partial visibility. The moment she had full sight again, she remembered what I brought. Eric must have seen the thread. He didn't say anything, but I noticed the next morning that the meeting invites started changing. I was suddenly added to the prep call for the next sprint review. Then a client-side calendar update arrived. Q4 planning, Dana and Marcella. Just like that, but I didn't celebrate. Not yet, because revenge isn't a single strike. It's positioning. I didn't want Eric out of the picture. I wanted him exactly where he was, watching, scrambling, losing grip, and unable to stop what was already in motion. The call with Marcella was set for 9 a.m. Thursday. Just the two of us. I sat in a small corner conference room, not the fancy boardroom Eric usually claimed for client meetings. No audience, no performance, just a quiet space with a clean notepad, a glass of water, and a copy of the original strategic deck I had built, slides no one else had touched. Marcella joined right on time. She always did. She looked the same, professional, alert, no nonsense. But her opening words surprised me. I'm glad we're talking like this again, Dana. I've missed the substance. It wasn't flattery. It was disappointment disguised as diplomacy. I smiled lightly. I've missed being useful. She raised an eyebrow. You've always been useful, just less visible lately. That was the moment. The opening. I didn't take a breath. I didn't launch into a tirade. I simply asked, do you remember the implementation metrics from Phase 2? The ones that helped push the board to greenlight the budget expansion? She nodded. Of course, they were strong, pulled directly from that insight matrix you put together. Except that's not how Eric had described it in the last leadership deck. He'd stripped the matrix, renamed it, and presented it as a new initiative from the broader team. No names, no credit. I gently turned my screen to show the version history of the document. Dated, tracked, labeled, my initials in every line. Her eyes scanned it fast, analytical, focused. I didn't need to say what she already saw. She leaned back, folded her arms, and said, "So, it's not just me. The shift hasn't been about team structure, it's been about narrative." I didn't confirm, I didn't deny, I just let the silence settle. Because Marcella was the kind of leader who didn't need drama to take action. She needed clarity, and I had given her that. The conversation shifted after that. We talked deliverables, client goals, next phase pivots. She asked what I thought of the upcoming roadmap and where I saw risks emerging. I answered directly, with the same tone I'd always used, with one difference. This time, I wasn't filtering through Eric's script. She listened closely, took notes, even asked for a follow-up doc based on my observations. By the end, she said simply, "Let's make sure your voice is fully in this again. It's overdue." When the call ended, I didn't cheer. I didn't gloat. I sat for a long moment and just breathed. It wasn't a win yet, but it was a fracture. A clean one, right through the version of reality Eric had built. And the thing about clean fractures? They spread fast when pressure hits the right spot. The following week, the shift became visible, subtle at first, then undeniable. Eric opened our Monday strategy call with his usual command, but this time, Marcella cut him off mid-sentence. I'd like Dana to walk us through the transition timeline. Her framework was sharper. He froze for half a beat, just long enough. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I clicked into the shared deck, opened my section, and spoke clearly, steadily, just like always. The client team listened more intently than I'd seen in months. Questions flowed to me, comments addressed me. When it ended, I got a quiet ping from Lena. "That was the best meeting we've had in weeks." Just saying. It happened again on Thursday. Marcella asked for a one-pager recap and directed the request to me, copying only me. Eric forwarded it 15 minutes later with a passive-aggressive, "Please loop me in next time," but the message was clear. The reins were slipping from his hands. Then came the request that sealed it. Marcella emailed our senior partner directly. As we move into Q4, I'd prefer Dana remain our primary contact. She has the historical knowledge and strategic clarity we need. Just like that. No fanfare, no accusation, just a precise recalibration of power. When Eric read that message, he was sitting 2 desks away. I watched his jaw tighten, watched him stare at the screen like it had personally betrayed him. He didn't speak to me that day, or the next, but I noticed he started scheduling one-on-ones with other managers, meetings behind closed doors, quiet scrambling. What he didn't understand was this. I hadn't gone around him. I hadn't exposed him. I hadn't even needed to raise a complaint. I'd simply given the truth a clear voice and stepped out of its way. I didn't have to bring him down. He was already falling. It was the fourth quarter kickoff, the kind of high-stakes client meeting that used to belong to Eric. Big audience, high visibility, months of planning behind it. This time, the lead presenter was me. I walked into the room 15 minutes early. Not out of nerves, out of respect for the moment. I arranged the agenda slides, checked the handouts, and made sure everything worked without needing anyone else's approval. Eric arrived last. He took a seat in the second row. No laptop, no notes. Just a forced smile that never quite reached his eyes. Marcella opened with a brief welcome, then turned to me with a nod. "Dana, take us in." I didn't rush. I spoke with clarity, not volume. Each section was layered with the context only someone who'd actually done the work could provide. I referenced past metrics, upcoming pivots, client-side challenges. Every insight backed by data, but delivered with lived understanding. Halfway through, I saw Eric fidget. He tried to interject once, some vague point about team bandwidth. Marcella didn't even turn toward him. "Let's stay focused on Dana's flow," she said. The message rang out in silence louder than any reprimand could have. By the time I reached the closing slide, future initiatives, growth planning, risk mitigation, I could feel it. The room was mine. Not because I had taken it by force, but because I had earned it. Again. The meeting ended with handshakes, praise, and calendar invites piling into my inbox. Marcella lingered behind just long enough to say, "This is where you've always belonged." I nodded. No need for more. As I packed up my things, Eric stood. For a second, it looked like he might approach, say something, reclaim a thread of authority. He didn't. He walked out without a word. It was over. Not with a blowout, not with a screaming match or dramatic exit. Just silence, just distance, just truth. Finally restored to its rightful place. And me, finally standing where I should have been all along. In the weeks that followed, things changed, but not loudly. Eric wasn't fired. He wasn't publicly reprimanded, but the spotlight he'd worked so hard to keep on himself quietly dimmed. Fewer client meetings, less access, more internal projects that didn't go anywhere. Eventually, he transferred to another division. No announcement, no goodbye email, just gone. I stayed. Marcella's team kept me on through Q4, then extended the engagement. After the fiscal year closed, her firm invited me to consult directly on a broader innovation initiative, independent of my employer. That offer changed everything. I took it. Leaving the company that had both shaped me and tried to erase me was harder than I expected, but not because of fear, because of closure. It meant accepting that some places won't honor your value no matter how much you give, but others will. Now, I work directly with executive clients, leading strategy from the inside. No middlemen, no games, just clarity, results, and mutual respect. People ask if I ever think about Eric. I don't. He was a chapter, but not the whole story. The revenge wasn't in taking him down. It was in building something he could never touch and being remembered for what I actually did, not what someone else claimed. Looking back, it wasn't Eric's betrayal that hurt the most. It was the silence that followed, the way people averted their eyes, the way my absence was treated like it had always been the plan. That's the part no one warns you about. That betrayal rarely comes with a slam. It comes with a shrug, but it taught me something I carry every day now. Power doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it's the quiet act of remembering who you are when everyone else has decided to forget. I never fought Eric in public, never called him out in a meeting. I didn't need to, because while he was playing for control, I was building credibility. And in the end, that's what endured. If you ever find yourself being erased, let them think they've succeeded. Let them underestimate you, but don't stop watching. Don't stop remembering. And when the time is right, step forward. Let your work speak and watch who listens. That's not revenge, that's restoration. And in my case, it was the only kind that ever mattered. If you've ever been pushed aside, underestimated, or quietly erased, drop a comment. Your story deserves to be seen. And if you know someone going through it right now, send this to them. They're not alone.